Good afternoon. I'm Bettina Inclan with NASA's Office of Communications. Welcome to our latest town hall with Administrator Jim Bridenstine. Today we have a very special guest, our new Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operation Mission Directorate, Douglas Loverro. As you know, we're trying to get a lot accomplished in human spaceflight, from returning the launch of Americans to the International Space Station on American rockets from American soil, to landing the first woman and next man on the moon by 2024 with the Artemis program. We encourage everyone across the agency to be part of this town hall discussion, and you can participate either through your mobile device or your desktop computer. Just go to nasa.gov/town hall at the top of your browser. Once you get to your town hall website, you'll be asked to add which center you're participating from. Then you'll have the option to either ask your question or vote for a question that's already on the list. We'll be taking questions from those who have joined us here in the web auditorium at headquarters and from the town hall website. I'm sure this will be a great discussion. We look forward to your questions. So let's get started. Without further ado, let's introduce Administrator Jim Bridenstine.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Bettina, thank you for that great intro into today's segment. We have a real pleasure today to meet our new Associate Administrator in charge of Human Exploration and Operations. And of course, this took a while. It took a while to get to today. We did indeed a nationwide search. We looked high and low for the absolute best person that would fit this role. And of course, there's a lot that goes into it. We're talking about not just technical expertise, not just program management capability, but leadership, and also some political challenges. NASA gets its funding from Congress. This, whether we like it or not, sometimes we don't like to admit it, but this is kind of a political organization. Maybe not partisan, and I'm very thrilled about that. We have bipartisan support, and we want to keep that. But we do have a lot of parochial interests. And so finding somebody with this very unique skill set that could fit this role took a bit of time. But I do believe that we have found the right person in Doug Loverro. I knew Doug when I was in the U.S. House of Representatives. At the time, he was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy. And I saw him make very impressive transformational changes within DoD space policy. And he used his position as DASD for Space Policy to actually affect programmatic change in a significant way that benefited our nation. I saw that firsthand as a member of the House of Representatives. So I will tell you, it took a bit to get here, but we are now here. We're grateful that you're here, Doug. And I'd like to start just by letting you share who you are, your background, where you come from, all the way back to maybe even your early days in the Air Force.
Thank you, sir. First of all, thank you for inviting me into your family. I mean, this is a great organization, one that I have admired my entire life, and I can say that with all truthfulness. And so it's great to become part of NASA. I've practiced in the other two parts of space within the nation, the defense part of space and the intelligence part of space. So I guess you can say I've now won the trifecta because I'm now on the civil side of space. So a fantastic opportunity. Let me tell you a little bit about myself for those of you in the audience who don't know me. I have spent 45 years in government service. I was out of the government for the last 2.5 years after the end of the Obama administration. But before that, my 45 years was in the government as a uniformed military officer and then later as a civil servant. I think if I add in my time at the Air Force Academy, it might be a little bit more than that. But that's how I started my career, at the Air Force Academy. And as many of those in my generation, I went to the Air Force Academy because I dreamed of going to space. I dreamed of being an astronaut at the time. I found out that it's actually more fun to conceive of space and to build space than it is to fly it. And it probably is a lot of fun to fly, but since I don't get to do that, I'm going to presume it's more fun to build and conceive. Okay? And it has just been a fantastic career for me. I started off, my first space job was doing command and control of space things for the United States Air Force. I quickly went to all sides of space. I ran the MilSatcom portfolio for the Secretary of Defense, the military satellite communications portfolio for the Secretary of Defense. I went out to the Space and Missile Systems Center, which is in Los Angeles, and I have a lot of great friends out there. And I ran all the classified Air Force space programs. And then I ran the program that obviously everybody in the world knows and depends upon, the GPS program. Now, before I get a bunch of questions on it, I am not responsible for the software on your phone that guides you in the wrong direction. I did the satellites, okay? The rest of it is up to Android, so it's not my fault. And I really, and that was a great introduction. And as Mr. Bridenstine says, the GPS program is one of those programs where you get to personally meet everybody in Congress, all the international partners, which we have here at NASA, because it affects the entire world, just as what we do here at NASA affects the entire world. After that, I went to the National Reconnaissance Office, ran some very big and aggressive programs at the National Reconnaissance Office, which is in charge of all of the intelligence classified satellites for the United States of America. Then I went back out to the Space and Missile Systems Center, where I oversaw the entire portfolio of space programs as the deputy to the commander out there. And then I got a real opportunity to do things in space I hadn't done before. I got to work on launch efforts there. We got to work on weather satellites, a lot of interaction with NOAA and NASA during that time that we were working on the NPOS program and the follow-ons to the NPOS program. So I got to work with folks at this organization already.
By the way, don't judge our new AA based on NPOS. I want to be really clear for those of you who are familiar.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you for that. No, I was in charge of shutting down the program, which I'm not sure is good or bad, but we do as we were told. And then in my last 4 years, I was asked by the Obama administration to come up and run space policy, which I felt like it was a job that I had been practicing for all of my career, because when you do space programs, you're creating space policy. And we do that as much in NASA here as we do within the DoD and the intelligence community. The things we do in space affect the entire world. They affect all of our citizens. They are of national importance. Every space program I've ever dealt with it goes up to the White House, goes up to Congress. And so I view that as all 45 years of training. I am the most overtrained I have ever been in my life at this stage. I'm not sure I'm ready for this challenge yet, but I know that you guys will help me along the way, because I've got a great team in HEO, and they're going to go ahead and complete my training so I can go ahead and finish that trifecta and come and help in civil space.
So that's good. You mentioned MilSatcom. That's where you started. Interestingly, when I was in the House, I think that's really where we first connected, because as a former Navy pilot myself, I've seen at certain times in certain theaters, we have SATCOM capacity available to us, and we have weapon systems that have SATCOM needs, but they're not compatible. You have commercial SATCOM, which is in C-band and Ka lower, and you have military SATCOM, which is in X-band and Ka upper. And guess what? They don't talk to each other. And we didn't build systems with multi-band capacity. So those were kind of, I think, our early connections. When I first started getting involved in space activities as a member of the House, that's where I started. And I think that's where we came. And you were talking about back then, how do we get frequency hopping? How do we get encryption into some of our commercial capabilities so that DoD can take advantage of them?
Right.
And not necessarily have to build those multi-band terminals. So, yeah, I had forgotten that we had that connection. I also asked Doug back in the day when I was in the House. It wasn't that long ago. I asked him to come testify on the Science Committee regarding debris. And of course, I'll tell you, if I remember right, it was the National Space Symposium, which is now just the Space Symposium. You and I had a conversation. And you mentioned, we were talking about debris regulation and how a lot of these companies don't like the regulation of debris. They don't like space traffic management. They don't want to be told that they have to maneuver a satellite. And you said, well, if they don't like regulation, wait until they run into a National Technical Means satellite. I remember that just like yesterday. And I remember thinking, well, that's a good point. He's like, there won't be regulation. There's going to be a stop to a lot of space activity. So yeah, share with us your background on that, and certainly some of the things that are on your mind regarding debris.
Absolutely. So I want to go on record here on national, at least NASA TV, as I have on the record at the Congress. I believe that we are absolutely required to reduce debris in space, and that the U.S. should lead in that endeavor. The U.S. should lead in that endeavor, and not just for civil space, for our commercial space partners. Debris is a anchor on on commercial progress we will make in space, and we don't need that anchor. We need to free our companies to do the things they need to do in space. We need to be able to support human spaceflight in space well into the future, and debris can be a very hazardous problem in space if we don't control it. It is in the U.S.'s economic and military interest to be a leader in the reduction of debris in space. And I said that when I was over in the DoD, and I'll repeat that over here in NASA, and I expect that to be something that I hopefully can participate in.
Absolutely.
Here as well.
So we have Space Policy Directive 3 we actually have an agency directed by the administration, that being the Commerce Department, that's going to be responsible for space situation awareness, space traffic management. Now NASA is not, we don't want to be the regulator, that's our goal, is to not be the regulator, but certainly we have an interest in making sure that debris is mitigated, and to the extent possible we can do space situation awareness, space traffic management to keep our assets safe, to keep our astronauts safe. And then ultimately we'd like to see a day when we can do remediation. A lot of our investments right now on the science side are focused on how do we do robotic servicing of satellites, Landsat 7 for example. So we do have a role to play there. It's a technological role, it's a capabilities role, not necessarily a regulatory role, and that's really what NASA does very well. So share with us, when you think back to your days at SMC, are there any particular projects or programs that you can remember specifically where maybe NASA had an impact?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We have the head of the science division sitting in front of us here, and he and I had a discussion just I think last week. And one of my first interactions with NASA was when I was running what was called the Space-Based Laser program at the time, and we teamed with NASA in order to develop large mirror technology. That technology made its way into the James Webb Space Telescope. And we've had those kind of collaborations between the DoD, between the intelligence community, and NASA from the beginnings of space. From the very beginnings, from the very first moments, all of the earliest NASA missions were flown on Air Force rockets. It was Thor and Athena and those kind of rockets that flew our early missions. So the collaboration between DoD and NASA has always been a key element of our nation's space underpinnings. And yet we have separate missions, and we have to respect those separate missions. Our job is a civil job. Our job is science and exploration and human endeavor, and the job of the DoD is to keep all of us safe every day in the intelligence community, to make sure they can let our leaders know what's happening in the world. Those jobs come together in the technology. We collaborate all of the time, but we have three separate missions.
That's great. What I'd like to do, if it's all right, can we go to questions either from the audience or online, and just kind of open it up?
Yeah, we'll take a question from the audience, and we'll pull up the questions from online on the screen in a moment. Question from the audience?
By the way, you guys I need to see 10 hands go up when question. There you go, we got a taker.
So good afternoon. I was wondering if you could comment a little, Doug, on your leadership style and some traits that you think are important for teams to meet kind of challenging goals.
Well, thank you. You know, Administrator Bridenstine said it when he was doing the introduction. There's many roles, there's many reasons that you select people for being in this role, and one of them is leadership. And to me, that's the most important reason. That is what we are. I have not turned a bolt in 40 years, and I don't anticipate turning any in this job. My job is to support the people who work for me, to go ahead and make sure they have the tools they need, whether it's turning a bolt or creating a contract or whatever the tool it is. And my job as the leader is to support them in that. My job as the leader is to enable them. My job as a leader is to give them vision and to give them purpose, to make them understand that the work that they're doing is critically important every day, and that we above them appreciate that every day. I'm a cheerleader. I'm certainly a teacher. I'm a mentor. I pride myself in mentoring folks that work for me. During the career, I have many young generals who used to work for me now. And it's hard to say young generals, but at my age, I get to say young generals. And so leadership is about giving people's life purpose, giving their work purpose, and making sure they are happy and fulfilled every day they come to work. And so that my leadership style is to try to do that. That's not really a direct answer on style. That's sort of more of an answer on what I try to achieve. I'm a smiling person. That's who I am. I've been smiling since the earliest photos of me when I was a child. I don't know why. I'm not sure what the joke is, but I apparently get it. Because by being pleasant and smiling, everybody around you is pleasant and smiling, and it really does help to change the morale of folks to the positive, which is something I pride in the organizations that I lead. So I hope that gives you a little sense of who I am. The only way you'll be able to decide if I'm a good leader or not is after you've lived with me for a year and decide whether or not I have lived up to the promise that I've just given you.
I'll tell you, as a former member of Congress, I saw him take the lead on a number of issues, not the least of which was what at the time we were calling the Space Corps. In the House of Representatives, it wasn't the Space Force, it was a Space Corps like the Marine Corps reports to the Navy, the Secretary of the Navy. The Space Corps would report to the Secretary of the Air Force. Doug was an early leader on these kind of initiatives. And it has kind of evolved from where he started to where it is now. But without him starting these dialogues in the House of Representatives among people on both sides of the aisle about what the real threat is, what the challenge is, how to meet those threats, the capabilities and limitations, and spending time with the key policymakers, the key decision makers, and leading them to a conclusion to where when we passed the Space Corps in the House, we got 344 votes. Strong bipartisan support. Doug should get a lot of credit for that. Of course, there's a lot of people involved, but Doug certainly deserves a lot of credit for making us aware of the history. I like what you said. You're a teacher. You are a teacher. You spend a lot of time making us understand where did the Air Force come from, and making us, and by the way, I knew that because I'm from the Navy. But a lot of members of Congress didn't. But there's a reason that we created the Air Force in 1948, and there's a reason that there's a time when we need to have a new force for a new domain. And you were very, very adept at leading our nation in that way when you were DASD for space policy. All right, more questions?
Yeah, so we have the questions from IO from the nasa.gov/town hall on the screen.
Okay.
So we'll answer some of those and also take some from the audience. So I'll keep
All right.
it to you, Jim.
All right, I'm going to turn around here if that's all right. Let's see, with new funding stalled, how does Moon 2024 differ from the other times Lucy has pulled the football away from the workforce? I'll tell you this, Doug. We do not have shy employees here at NASA. This is about Doug. I'm going to take this one. We're going to knock some of these down here that are probably more focused on me. The key here is, know this, we have strong bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. It was just a few months ago, I was out at the Ames Research Center in California, and I did Women's Equality Day with the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And she looked right at me as I sat in the audience in front of hundreds of people, cameras rolling, and said, "We're all counting on you to get the first woman on the moon." And then she also said in the press conference, she said, "Mr. Administrator, you honor us with your presence." And she said, "I'm so glad that you called the program Artemis, which is named after the Greek goddess of the moon." And she said, we're so glad that you're willing to do that. So this is, I think, a program that has strong bipartisan support. I will also tell you that we have a funding bill that came out of the Senate committee, the Commerce, Justice, Science Committee in the Senate, with zero opposition that included funding for landing on the moon. With zero opposition. That means the Democrats were all in favor of it. And of course, we have strong leaders on both sides of the aisle that made that happen. So I will say we're not out of the woods. There is no doubt getting appropriations in this time is difficult. But it is also true that we have until December 20th, and I've talked to a number of folks on the Hill that are working very hard to see some minibuses come to the floor and that want to see NASA in one of those minibuses at the levels necessary to keep us on track to land on the moon in 2024 under the Artemis program. So I think this is something that we are, as a nation, capable of doing. It's going to be up to us and some of us in this room to move forward and inspire the nation, because this isn't political. It's not partisan. Don't get me wrong. When you talk about appropriations these days, everything gets bogged down and everything else. It all gets tied together, and the next thing you know, things don't happen that you thought were a slam dunk. But this is something that should be easy. We need all members on both sides to get a win out of it, and I think they'll see it that way. Do you have any comments, Doug?
You know, I think I absolutely agree with everything you've said there, but in my way of thinking is we can't use funding as the crutch upon which we say we can't make the objectives we've been asked. Our job is to create the vision that allows us to get to the moon, to convince Congress that the program they're supporting is one they really want to support, which I think is already given, and to have the imagination to figure out how, because we're not going to get every dollar we've asked for every year, but have the imagination to figure out how we treat funding just like we treat any other issue that comes up in the program. We are going to have technical issues, engineering issues, science issues. We are going to have issues across the board, and funding is one of those issues. We can't let that be the single determinant of success.
Good. All right, what is the agency's plan for when the majority of the workforce retires in the next 5 years? Important skills aren't being handed down. Hiring processes are the slowest they've ever been. Civil servants are being replaced by contract or temp hires. What's the plan here? Again, not a shy workforce. I will tell you, I think it's important to remember. Doug, you have.
And I can't sit down while my boss is standing, so I'm going to have to stand up too.
All right.
So you know, I told some folks earlier today we had the same dynamic when we were out at the Space and Missile Systems Center. Folks came to me, the personnel folks came to me when I got there at the beginning. I spent 5 years there. They came to me at the beginning. They said half the workforce can retire in the next 5 years, and you know what? They didn't. And you know why? Because they love the work. They love the work. Look, I've retired twice from government service. I'm back here, right? You know, so I was about to start and file for Social Security, but I'm back here because this work is fun. It's important. How could you find anything better to do in life than work that is fun and important? And to me, that keeps people in well beyond. We don't have clock punchers in NASA. We don't have clock punchers in DoD space. We don't have folks who are waiting for that day that they can say, got my pension, I'm out of here. Most people their fingernails are dragging down the carpet as their spouse pulls them out of NASA and says, time to do something else. So I think that while we absolutely, and let's make no question about it, we absolutely must go ahead and prepare the next generation for leadership at NASA. I am not fearful of everybody walking out the door tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. So.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. I would also say in November we kicked off the Strategic Workforce Development Initiative for NASA. There's a lot of things on the table there. Of course, we want more direct hire authority. We're getting that now from not just the administration, but also maybe put into law. There's different proposals in law for that. So there's a lot of different ways that we can mitigate the pending gap. But I think you're right. The gap, while there is a bow wave of people eligible for retirement, I don't think it necessarily means that there's going to be retirement. We do need to be prepared. And of course, that's going to require leadership, mentorship, training the next generation, getting those people ready to take on these critically important jobs of the future. Let's see. I had a different one up there. I'll go to the next one here. The SLS is projected to cost at least $2 billion per flight. Commercial heavy lift launch vehicles currently under development, such as SpaceX, Starship, and Blue Origin New Glenn, are projected to cost a fraction of the SLS per launch and be reusable. How can the SLS compete with the commercial vehicles, and how can the high cost be justified in an era of constrained NASA budgets? Real quick, and I'll turn it over to Doug. I do not agree with the $2 billion number. It is far less than that. I would also say that the number comes way down when you buy more than one or two. And so I think at the end we're going to be in the $800 million to $900 million range. I don't know, honestly. We have recently just begun negotiations on what number 3 through whatever and we don't have to buy any, quite frankly, but we intend to. But we're looking at what we could negotiate to get the best price for the American taxpayer, which is my obligation as the head of NASA. So if you want to take on any of those other challenging questions that were part of that.
Absolutely. The word competition was used up there, competing, as if SLS is competing with commercial space. I don't view that as all the dynamic. I think this is a large ecosystem of space capabilities, and we need every capability that the nation is going to provide, whether the nation provides it through government funding, as SLS is, or through entrepreneurial and commercial funding, such as for New Glenn and for Starship. The fact of the matter is the only system we have today that is designed, purpose-built, to go ahead and get men to the moon and women to the moon is the SLS. That program is absolutely mandatory, in my view, right now, to go ahead and get there. But we have so much other work to do to go ahead and get payloads to the moon, to get cargo to the moon, to prepare the surface for when those folks arrive. And we have a long plan for exploration that will require us to go ahead and utilize the best U.S. industry can provide. So I refuse to view it as an either-or. Certainly, we will make decisions along the way as to what makes most sense as developments of all of those systems come forward. But we've got to go ahead and right now focus on the one that we have designed specifically for the mission, and then we will evaluate as we move forward how many of them do we need, how do we go ahead and integrate commercial into there. I think this is a multifaceted answer, not a monolithic answer.
I agree with everything you just said. I also would say that the 2024 deadline, the idea that we go fast, necessitates that we all work together. SLS, we cannot get there without SLS. Everybody knows that. And we don't want SLS to just one day stop after all of this investment. At the same time, to go in 2024, we're going to need to aggregate capability at the gateway. That capability could be delivered commercially. It could be delivered by one of the rockets mentioned in the question. So when we go fast and when we see increasing budgets, which we have seen, there's going to be lots of opportunity for all of the players to have lots of success and enable all of us to do more. So I think your holistic approach is right on. All right, so the next one is about climate change. NASA should lead on technology and help develop sustainable energy solutions. A couple of things on this. Number one, and this, I'm sorry, it's not your question. So people need to know, and this is absolutely true, our Earth science budget is today as high as it's ever been. And under my leadership, I have worked very hard to make sure everybody understands the importance of that Earth science budget, because the climate is changing. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. And we need to make sure that we are leading when it comes to doing the science and the technology that is necessary to inform decision makers as to how the Earth is changing. And you have heard me say before, I said it when I was in the House. When you look at the Arctic ice alone, I'm a Navy pilot by trade. We are now in a position where we have to defend the Arctic. That didn't used to be the case, but the ice isn't there anymore. So the Earth is changing. That can't be denied. The question is, what does NASA do? Well, we study it. And there's a lot that we don't yet know. And we're going to continue to take all of that data from all of those great Earth science capabilities, and we're going to share that data with the world for free. That's what we're going to do. Now, I will also tell you, I have to be really careful, because we have strong bipartisan support right now, and here's what we need to do. We need to dispassionately follow the science, dispassionately get the data, and make sure that science and data is available to the world for free. But what we don't want to do, and this is not in our job description, is tell policymakers what they need to do in response to what NASA's data says. We dispassionately collect the science. We don't delve into the politics of policy related to what to do about what we're learning. That's for somebody else. So know this. I am committed to Earth science. We have been committed to Earth science. Our Earth science budget is as high as it's ever been. It hasn't gone down $1 since the Trump administration took office. I've been committed doing what I can to protect it, and we'll continue to do that.
So, Jim, if
Okay,
we can,
we got
we'll see if we
questions
have
in the
any
audience.
questions in the audience. I guess they all ask them
I know.
online.
Everybody's really
all
bold online, I've noticed. All right, what do we
We'll
got next?
continue with IO, yeah.
All right, what role will NASA play in the DoD's newly formed Space Force? Doug, you have any ideas on that one?
I will. It's a really one-word answer, none. But let me add on to that. So first of all, as I've already said, we have three sides of space within the nation. We have intelligence space, we have DoD defense space, and we have civil space. They are separate mission areas. The Space Force does not go ahead and impact NASA directly, but it does indirectly. And I'll tell you why, in my opinion, it does indirectly, and it's part of the reason why I think we needed a Space Force. It used to be there was a revolving door, which sometimes has a bad context, but in this case is a good context. There was a revolving door between NASA and the Air Force in moving people back and forth to go ahead and share lessons that have been learned in these different diverse environments together. I always like to remind people that the Space Shuttle program was run by an Air Force three-star general, James Abramson. The Lunar Lander program was run by Sam Phillips. These are General Sam Phillips, Major General Sam Phillips. These were Air Force leaders who were the top of their game. When NASA went out to look for people to run their space programs at the time, back in the 60s and the early 70s, they found that some of the best people were folks who had learned their skills on the DoD side of space and wanted them on this side, and then sent them back to take the lessons they had learned here back to the DoD. And I for one, would love to restart that revolving door. I think the Space Force is part of that, to create the leaders that we can engage back here at NASA and use the shared intelligence that we all have in space to go ahead and get this job done. You know, I was privileged to be sworn in yesterday by Administrator Bridenstine in front of many of you in the audience today, and took that oath. But you know, it's the same oath, exactly the same oath, with exactly the same words that I took when I was in uniform, because we're all part of the same team. We may have different roles and missions during parts of our career, but we're part of the same team. Space Force helps build that other team. You know, maybe it probably would demean them by saying they're the minor leagues to our major leagues. That's probably not fair. But we certainly want to bring players up, and we want to send players that side as well, because that's how we make sure we get done what the nation needs to get done.
You know, I think there is another role that is indirect that we play, and that is, and you know, of course, there's a lot of technology overlap, no question about that. But there's another role. I think I've heard General Hyten say in the past that you can't deter in the black. And when you talk about a lot of the DoD capabilities, they're in the black. They're classified programs, and you can't deter in the black. So where does NASA play in this? Well, we can do stunning achievements to show the whole world our capabilities that we want the whole world to see, free and open. And in fact, we could go back and talk about maybe historically, we talk about the Strategic Defense Initiative. I presume you might have been involved in that early.
I was.
I say I presume. I don't know. You're probably too young for that. I don't know. But I would say the Strategic Defense Initiative. At the end of the day, it was a great idea, a great initiative. It got belittled by a lot of people. People said it wasn't technologically feasible. It was too expensive. It'll never happen. They called it the Star Wars program to try to belittle it. But what was interesting is people around the world took it very seriously, including the former Soviet Union. And eventually it became a piece of the ultimate collapse of the Soviet Union because they invested so heavily to mitigate against it, even though we did not, in the end, invest in it. The question is why? Why did it have so much credibility? I really believe that it had a lot of credibility in other nations because they saw that just maybe 12 or 13 years prior, we had people walking on the surface of the moon, an achievement that others had tried and failed at, and we did it 6 times with 12 people. So I think that we do have a role to play in national security where we demonstrate amazing capabilities that deter threats, because they know that if we're doing this in the white, what are we doing, in classified programs?
Exactly.
So I think there's a role to play there. Okay, so Mr. Bridenstine, why did you remove Mr. Gerstenmaier from this position? Another great question. I want to be really clear. We love Bill Gerstenmaier. And I will also say that he is not gone. He still works for NASA. He's the senior advisor to the deputy administrator, and he's still doing great work on behalf of the agency. I will also say he was in this job for 13 years, which, by the way, is about 10 years more than the average person is in this job. Not that I'm saying you're going to be a short-termer, but you get my point. 13 years is a long time. And it's also true that in those years, a lot of it was during a time of constraint where budgets were actually going down. And he managed, I think, excessively well in that environment to try to hold all the pieces together. And then there came a time when now our budgets are going up. And it was time, in my view, to find a leader that had a long history of making programs run on schedule and on budget. And I think Doug is that kind of leader, not to take anything away from Bill Gerstenmaier. He did amazing things for our country. He's still doing amazing things for our country. But we have had a number of IG reports, a number of GAO reports. We've had a lot of challenges for members of Congress. We need to get on budget and on schedule. And I think we needed somebody who has a long history of making programs meet schedule and budget. And I think Doug Loverro is that kind of leader.
Sir, if I could just say
Yes.
something. I mean, and I said this in my welcome letter to many of you yesterday, we are poised where we are today to succeed in what the President and the nation has asked us to do because of the work that Bill did within HEO. And I would love to give him a round of applause here because I think he's done just an amazing job.
Thank you for that, Doug. Okay, Artemis lacks the congressional support required to make it a reality. For how long will NASA continue to pretend otherwise? So, to be clear,
That's a softball question.
we do have, like I said, the bill that came out of committee in the Senate had 0 opposition. Now, will that happen in the Senate at large? It depends what it gets mixed with. But we do have strong bipartisan support. We have public statements from the Speaker of the House saying she wants to see this happen. And I want to make it happen. It should be part of her legacy. It should be part of the legacy of all members of Congress. And I really do believe that by December 20th, we have a strong probability of getting into an omnibus that will fund us for the rest of the year. Now, make no mistake, I've seen these things go south before, and I might have been a part of a process or two where it went south. But that being said, I think that right now we're in a good position to get an appropriation bill by December 20th. Okay, programs are working towards unrealistic launch dates. Okay, putting extreme pressure on employees to work towards milestones that the programs are not mature enough to complete. Wow, this sounds like... All right, employees are sacrificing time with their families and health in some cases, dedicating extra hours to these unrealistic dates. How will the administration work towards more realism in launch dates to give relief to employees and increase work-life balance in these programs? Great question, a couple of things, and I'll let Doug talk to it here in a second. I would say very clearly that we have done lots of surveys from the government as to the best places to work in the federal government. The number one place in the federal government where people find the highest job satisfaction is right here at NASA. And the reason for that is because of the leaders that are not only in this room, but the program managers, the center directors, all of the people across NASA that care about their employees. And we cannot dismiss the results. The results have been very clear. NASA is the best place to work, and by the way, by a large margin. Nobody else is even close. That being said, clearly there's somebody here who might feel like they need some help. And I will tell you, as a family, we ought to be helping this person or others like it who feel like they've got too much pressure on them. And guess what? We have the capability to help. And I encourage everybody here to look for people like this and help them out. Doug, do you have a thought?
I absolutely agree with what you said, sir. And, I think it's an incorrect dichotomy to suggest that we either have to go ahead and have a family life or we have to make schedule and we can't have both at the same time. To me, that's just untrue. Now, I'm probably the pot calling the kettle black because I work long hours, but I also enjoy my family, and I had my granddaughters here with me yesterday, and we spend a lot of time together. But I also spend a lot of hard time at work, and I think everybody here enjoys going ahead and working hard, and everybody here enjoys their families. And we all have a different balance to achieve, but we don't need to sacrifice families to make schedule. Look, there's always a rush when you're in the middle of a launch countdown, which might go a week or so, to go ahead and have to work those extra hours. But the real situation is that all things we do in life take work, and we have to balance the two of them. And it's our responsibility as leaders, I think, as Mr. Bridenstine said, to make sure people are balancing their time. We don't have to sacrifice our schedule and ask people to sacrifice their families. That would be the incorrect thing to do.
And I would also add, when I was not just interviewing Doug, but calling all of your references, and by the way, I called a bunch of references you didn't know, but we know a lot of the same people, so I would call. The one thing that I heard over and over again, without exception, is that you will never find anybody that works harder than Doug Loverro. And I will tell you, I saw that when I was in the House. He was working relentlessly on accomplishing the goals of our national space policy. It is also, I think, true that what we do is unique, and it requires maybe a different level of commitment. And I don't say this, I'm not talking about doing anything that would be problematic, but we are talking about doing civilization-changing activities. That's what we're talking about. And that might not be for everybody. But at the same time, I'll tell you, the people that I know and work at this agency are the brightest, are the hardest working, are the most impressive, and you don't have to go very far to find that here at this agency. So we are very grateful to have this workforce.
You guys.
Jim, Administrator, sir.
Yes.
We have a few questions here in the
good.
audience.
Audience questions.
Yeah.
Good.
Dr. Zerbukin.
Sit down.
Sit down, Doc.
It's going to be a hard one, I can tell.
No. Look, I have one comment and two questions. And the first one
Real
comment
quick,
is just...
will you let everybody know who you are?
Oh, yeah, I'm Thomas Zerbukin, Head of Science,
Okay.
Associate Administrator for Science. Look, I just want to congratulate you and wish you all the best for this amazing job. I want to tell you that just like from the beginning when I stepped in this, which is the only time I really know in this agency, we will be partners, full partners with what you're trying to do. We'll do everything we can to help achieve this amazing agency, achieve the amazing goal that we have in front of us. So we will do that. So first question is going to be an easy one. Tell us about your pin.
My pin, So this pin says 1,855 on it today. Yesterday it said 1,856. This is my D- pin till the end of 2024, December 31st, 2024. That's how much time that we have to go ahead and achieve the nation's goals. Some people have commented to me that this can create launch fever. Well, if this is launch fever, then I'm feeling pretty healthy right now. But seriously, that's not the intent here. That's not the intent to show people we're under the gun. The intent here is not to go ahead and tell people to rush. The intent here is to say, make every day count. Make every day count. Do something every day that helps us achieve our mission even more. Every day is important, as every one of us are. And if every individual makes something happen every day that helps us achieve our mission, this is going to be easy. It is going to be easy to make this happen. So this is a reminder that every day counts. Well, in my workshop, I have many experimental models down that I've cut up, and I am still working on. Well, now that you're going to have to pay me for because the amount of time I spend on this is not included in my salary. I would love. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this, but I would love to find others who would like to make these pins because I would love to order pins for all of us. But I do not want to encourage anybody to take me up on that unless you personally, absolutely, in your gut, want that, and then we'll figure out a way to make it happen. So.
I'll tell you, I was thrilled when I saw that yesterday. It shows a level of commitment to the Artemis program that we need, and that I think it inspires the workforce. So thank you for wearing it.
So I'm going to ask the harder question. I mean, I love one too. When you're ready, you found your business. So let's see. The other question is really the one that we spend a lot of time with, and I think it's really important that you answer it here. In what way can science help human exploration in that amazing goal?
Absolutely. And Thomas, thank you. I got to meet Thomas just about a month, a little more than a month ago, I think. And I already can tell we're going to be great partners in this journey together. It is fun to find somebody as passionate as me about what they do. And to me, there is a absolute natural affinity between the purpose of exploration and the purpose of science. We do that together. And believe me, I am going to depend upon science to get done the things that I can't get done, because you are the experts. We need to find resources on the moon. I don't know how to do that. You know how to do that. My job will figure out how to go ahead and extract them later for use, but that's a science job. Science job has to do with all of the science on radiation. The Parker Solar Probe today is going to give us just reams of data about how much radiation we can expect on our journey to Mars. And make no mistake about it, we may be focused in 1,855 days on the moon, but Mars lies just beyond. And so we absolutely need to have partners. There are critical science questions I'm not even sure we've thought of yet that have to be answered. And SMD will be in the lead in all those, and I'm going to depend upon our collaborative friendship to go ahead and get that done. So thank you, Thomas.
So I think this is a great legacy issue with Bill Gerstenmaier. He really embraced the idea that science and exploration were not distinct and separate. And of course, I know Thomas has been leading on this as well. But there has been a history in the agency where people did, and by the way, even in the House today and in the Senate, people create these dichotomies that are not helpful. And I will say that when we do have an architecture for human exploration around the moon and on the surface of the moon, all of a sudden our ability to do science goes way up. Astrophysics missions in orbit around the moon using the communication architecture from the moon, that means the cost of a science mission goes down. That means we can get more science for less cost. We talk about not just the astrophysics from the moon on the far side where it's very quiet, but also the science of the regolith itself. The moon is a repository of impacts for billions of years. Those impacts are asteroids. Those impacts are also subatomic charged particles from the sun. So the moon itself is heliophysics, it's astrophysics. It used to be part, according to a lot of scientists at this agency, the moon was likely a part of the Earth at one point. That being the case, we can learn a lot about the Earth by going to the moon and seeing maybe what the early Earth might have been like. There's all kinds of reasons to go to the moon from a science perspective, and of course, tying it all together in a way where both science and human exploration benefit greatly from the collaboration is something that we need to really be communicating on a lot. And I know we've got great leaders here doing that now.
Mm-hmm. So we have
do we have
time
more?
for one more question.
Okay, one more.
And then we'll go to closing remarks. So if you want to...
Okay. All right, let's go to Mr. Douglas Loverro. Your predecessor, William Gerstenmaier, heard several major technical dissenting opinions by NASA engineers regarding the first two Artemis missions with the Integrated Space Launch System and Orion, and with respect to flight risk. Mr. Gerstenmaier listened to these carefully, wrote and issued detailed minutes, and assigned substantial actions to the NASA programs. Are these in limbo, or are you actively reviewing these for possible future actions? Thank you.
Sure. So, great question. By no means are any of these questions in limbo. Now, I'm on hour 26 of my NASA flight, so I can't tell you that I have reviewed all of these as of now. But every one of them, I think, are important. Are certainly important questions to answer. I have seen the testimonies. I've read the stories. I have not personally been in the meetings, but certainly I know about a lot of the concerns. And I think we need to satisfy ourselves that we've got the right answer. And if we don't have the right answer, then we'll change. Then we'll make changes. That's part of, back to the question of leadership that was asked earlier, part of the questions of one of being a leader is being willing to admit that we have to change the plan. and not to slavelessly, I'm not sure I can say that very well, but as a slave, go ahead and follow just because it's written down. I think we've got a good plan. I think we will find elements of the plan that have to be changed. We will find comments that are critical to incorporate from outsiders, and I quite frankly invite those. My job over the next 3 months is to examine all of those things, is to figure out where we are on the baseline of the program, what do we need to go ahead and modify, what do we need to change in order to go ahead and raise even more our chances of success.
Awesome. All right. Well, Doug, thank you for taking your lunch hour, and everybody here, thank you for taking your lunch hour. We do this obviously because folks on the West Coast are watching, and it's not their lunch hour, so we're taking the bullet on this one. But I'll say it's been a real pleasure sharing the stage with you and hearing some of your thoughts and getting to know you better. You have my full support.
Thank you, sir.
As you're aware, I end up traveling a lot. I'm sure on a lot of those missions, you're going to be going with me on those trips. And many times we're going to be working separately from each other. Mm-hmm. That's why we've got Steve Jerzik. He's going to be he is basically the chief operations officer for the agency, and we're looking forward to you and he getting to know each other and working together, as well as working down and in and getting to know the center directors and all the different programs. And I hope everybody in the agency knows that we have a person here who has experience, who has spent a lot of time working on programs for other agencies, and he has met schedule and he's met budget in a very effective way. And he's done it as a junior officer all the way up to Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy. He's operated at every level of the federal government. But interestingly, he's not operated at NASA yet. And now he's going to have that opportunity, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you here, and we look forward to all the great work that you're about to do.
Thank
so,
you,
Doug,
sir.
Any closing comments?
Sir, it's hard to follow that up. This is the pleasure and excitement of my career. I could not have passed this up and could have asked for a better opportunity and, quite frankly, a better leader to come work for at this incredible time for our nation. We are going to wow the nation just as we have in the past, and I'm going to be so happy to be able to say that I was part of that. So thank you all for welcoming.
Thank you, Doug.